and welcome to an Insight Intelligent Technology Pulse. You know, AI is everywhere right now, and if you've been looking at a PC recently, you've probably noticed some different terms like TOPS and different types of chipsets, and there's a reason for that. So we're going to dive into that today. Insight recently conducted a survey with the Harris Poll to find out different generational perspectives on this new generation of AI PCs. So here to break it down, we've got an excellent panel today. Let's just dive right in. So again, we did this survey, and really what we're seeing is this huge trend in growing AI devices. So Rob, maybe break this down for us. Why are we seeing this right now, and really why does this matter?
That's a fair question. I think there's a few drivers right now. One, it's hard to believe, but we're 4 years removed from the onset of the pandemic. And so it's amazing that 4 years has gone by, first of all. But most importantly, you think about what happened in the early days of the pandemic. We saw a lot of buying of devices, laptops, tablets, monitors to enable work from home.
It was a great time.
It was a great time, yeah. Yeah, remember those days so fondly.
I do.
But you know, a lot of those devices now are 4 years old. They're coming to end of life, and so we're starting to see signals that companies are starting the refresh cycle. We got Windows 10 that's coming to end of life. That's going to drive it, and then we got these new architectures for endpoint devices, for laptops, tablets, with AI-specific chip architectures. And so I think all of that coming together is really going to drive this wave of demand. We're going to see a refresh cycle, but we've got this new technology coming online, and we want to be able to leverage it and help, use it to drive productivity. So I think those confluence of factors are really bringing it all together.
Yeah, Matt, you're the VP of IT here. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with Rob. I mean, when you look at it with the device life cycle, and if you switch out a device now, you're looking at another 3 to 4 to 5 years possibly before you could invest in that technology. So adopting that earlier now to be able to take advantage of that as they continue to advance AI is probably the exactly right thing to do right now.
Yeah, no sense in getting a computer that's going to be useless in a year or
Correct.
two. So with this boon of AI, how are original equipment manufacturers and other brands responding to it? Megan, maybe you can take this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So very leaned in. They've been thinking about this for years with the ecosystem of the chip partners. They're all really excited about it. They're making big bets on new partners, such as Qualcomm that's entering the space here. And we're really seeing from Microsoft that they see a huge opportunity, not only with the 3-year refresh, but also when 11 is going end of life in October of 2025. And so Microsoft's really updating their messaging now to say, hey, you should update to Win 11 because it's so much better from a productivity or security perspective. But they're also now saying, we're really not going to support it, by the way. And if we do, it's going to be incredibly expensive. So there's a lot of catalysts for companies to go and refresh their devices. In my opinion, there's so many reasons that I could see us entering into a situation of a chip shortage again. So we're really encouraging our clients to start thinking about their refresh cycle. The Gen AI PCs offer such a huge productivity lift, but it's different by persona. And so that's really what we're working on now with the OEMs as well as Microsoft, is to say there's newer versions of Microsoft Copilot coming out. I mean, think right now for how incredible Copilot is, it's the worst it's going to be.
True.
And so add in the enhancements that are coming with Copilot to the actual generative AI PCs that are coming out. We're really having to look at it persona by persona so we can be descriptive in terms of the value that it's going to provide an organization in terms of productivity uplift and also just teammate sentiment. I mean, who wants to work at a company that isn't leaning into the latest and greatest technologies?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned productivity because that is a really big feature that everybody from the employers to the employees are excited about.
Yeah.
In fact, when we conducted the survey, 73% of employees really believe that AI devices will help them be more productive. Now, I'm going to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer here because we always think the next thing is going to help us be more productive. Is this another pipe dream, or are we actually getting closer to like that flow state?
I think we're getting closer to that flow state. I'm going to lean into the optimism here. And sadly, I'm old enough to remember a time when not everybody actually had a PC on their desk.
What?
And then, I know, yes, I know I don't look it, but I am that old. But you know, if you think about the productivity gains that came online as we moved through the late 80s and through the 90s, right? And it was not just the personal computer, it was compute power getting into manufacturing, getting into the service industry, and then starting to connect those things together. And we couldn't have predicted in the early stages of that how much more productive we would get. But if you think about what happened to the US economy over the course of the 90s, the productivity gains really drove economic expansion. And I think there's a lot of parallels to what we're going to see as we go forward over the next decade with Gen AI. I think it is that much of a game changer that it's really going to drive productivity enhancement. And the challenge with that is you can only sometimes assess that in the rear view mirror. So proving out the ROI up front is a bit of a conundrum. And that's going to be something that we're going to be challenged by, and our clients are going to be challenged by as well. So we want to lean in and we want to invest in Gen AI. What's the ROI? So we're going to have to develop the use cases and really test and measure those to be able to prove it out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up that example because in our survey, again, we broke it up by different age groups. And it was the youngest generation that has the most optimism. This is going to help them be productive. And it was the older generation, the X and the boomers that were like, eh.
Well, I was going to say, and you can see that, right? With the Gen Z type, that 12 to 27 ages, they're already using that type of stuff in their own personal lives, with on their social media apps or their different things. So they already see the value of these types of things with stuff they're creating on their own. So that coming into the corporate environment makes complete sense. And I would lean on what Rob said too, is the productivity is going to come. If you look at the investment and what they're doing from a Gen AI perspective, I would almost kind of look at that from the same standpoint of I'm not going to run like an F1 car on a bumpy road. These Gen AI devices provide that platform where all this investment is going to, the productivity is going to come, right? It's really going to give you that surface to go on with everything. And you're seeing it, like I think Megan said, I mean, even at the infancy of what some of this stuff is now, you can see the gains off of some of this, so it's only going to get better. And you look at where it's come for a short period of time, when you start going another year, 2, 3 years, if you look at the advancement of that, it's going to come.
Yeah. Just going to take some time.
What I love about Insight, though, is we're always early adopters of the coolest technology. So, Matt, do you just want to mention a little bit about what we're doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got devices already in our hands that we're testing. We're actually seeing the gains, right? Longer battery life, faster speeds, all these different types of things, which gives us a great, opportunity to, see how these things perform in real life off of what is being promised. And a lot of the stuff is delivering, which is good. Yeah,
because to Rob's case about, or comment about use cases, our strongest ones are what we're doing internally. When we have people like Matt getting on and saying how he measured it. It's awesome when we can also put, non-generative AI PC versus generative AI PC in a client EBC and show them based on persona the differences, but it's also a little bit more proven when you have somebody that's been adopting it and looking at it for months, giving feedback.
What is some of the key ROIs you're looking for in those devices? You mentioned speed.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at speed. I mean, there's a longer battery life off of these devices, just the level of performance. The fact that these new devices, they're allocating resources just specifically for Gen AI. It's pulling resources and basically doing it more locally versus in the cloud, which is a little bit opposite of what we've seen in the past, recently in the past, like push everything to the cloud. This is getting locally. Again, that's going to help with speed, that's going to help with performance. So things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd add, and getting them in the hands of our developers, right? We've got development teams spread around the world, and they're always eager early adopters because they get the enhanced productivity that comes from the improved, chipsets, battery life, and it just helps them be more productive as coders and as developers. So that's a very specific use case that we're testing with.
Those were two very technical answers. What I would say is content creation. At Insight, we love a meeting We love a PowerPoint.
We do love
you know?
a PowerPoint.
So,
I love language.
Yeah, so just that ability for the speed of execution around that, the prompting that it does for responses to emails or just questions, that really, kind of get you going. You do have to read it and edit it, but everyone's sounding a lot more eloquent these days, I have to say. You know what I mean? And their imagery and their PowerPoints are pretty on point.
We're stepping it up a notch.
Yeah,
that's so true, and I think we can't lose sight of that, Megan. I mean, the end users, right? When I think about Copilot usage, we've rolled out Microsoft's Copilot and a few other Copilot from other vendors, and we have the ability to look at how they're using it and how they're deploying it, and putting AI-enabled device in the hands of end users who are leaning into the Copilots is going to be hugely valuable as well.
How many Copilot licenses are we up to now?
We have over 5,000.
Which is incredible.
Environment.
That's
Heavy
almost half
user
of our
right here.
workforce. Yeah, it's almost half our workforce. So we're definitely leaned into it as an organization.
Yeah.
What I think is great too is there's all these positives, but we're also running into the initial adoption challenges. So by the time we talk to our partners and clients, we're able to talk intelligently about how to get around it, what we ran into. So it's not always about the positives sometimes, it's what didn't go right and how did you get through that. So we're educating ourselves on that already, and we've run into some things and be able to solution for those types of things, or where do they apply. And I think that's sometimes overlooked. It's good to run into those issues now, not later.
Do you have an example of that? Because I know that adoption for a lot of companies has been hard, and it's a big investment to do this.
It's some of the stuff with some of the new things that are rolling out. It's, hey, this application might not work, or these agents on the PCs might not be compatible, and then you're providing that feedback back to have those things done now, so by the time it comes out, I mean, if you look at the course of any company, how many applications and how many different types of things are you using? Not everything's going to be perfect that first time with everything, so it's about working through those. So we're catching those early, so as we talk to clients, partners, we're able to, kind of communicate what we've run into.
And I guess add to that, we've got the instrumentation to be able to look at adoption and usage, and that's usually valuable as well, because if you're going to make the investment, you want to know that it's getting adopted and it's getting leveraged, to the benefit of the end user, the developer, the personas that you're rolling it out to.
Yeah.
Microsoft's spending a ton of time in this space, as we're rolling out the generative AI PCs across our ecosystem of OEM partners. They're spending a huge amount of time testing the applications that run on, the majority of large enterprise customers, so that they can say, hey, we've already tested all of these, so you don't need to spend any time there. And if you have a tail of a few applications that you need to test, go ahead and do that, but these are already proven. So I guess that makes me more bullish on the adoption of generative AI PCs too, because that takes a huge time away from IT departments to have to go test all of their applications and just be able to look down a list and know what's left to look at.
Overwhelmingly, people do feel pretty positive about AI, but of course, there are some concerns. So we're just going to take a moment to address the elephant in the room. I'm going to read off a couple stats. This comes from our survey. I'll start out again with the positive. So the top 3 feelings, and this is across the generations that we surveyed: curiosity, caution, excitement. So caution, I think, is fine. We want them to be a little bit cautious. But then when you ask them more personally, how you really feel about having AI PCs, having AI in the workforce, a couple things come to the surface. More than 2 in 5 workers, that's about 43%, share anxiety that AI-powered devices will lead to job loss, and this is most highly felt by millennials. I'm an elder millennial, so I can kind of relate to this. 45%, so close to half of employees believe that AI-powered devices will make what they do less relevant to their employer. And then nearly 2 in 3 believe that AI devices will impact the critical skills needed to do their job, and again, mostly felt by millennials. So hearing those stats, kind of what's your reaction specifically for the generations that are feeling this, and how do you kind of encourage or let employees know that this isn't going to be a job displacement activity?
I'll lean into sort of the technology shifts that we've seen over the last, say, 20, 30 years, because it's a very common theme that emerges, right? There's that anxiety about, this is going to be disruptive. How is it going to be disruptive? Is it going to displace a lot of workers? And typically what happens is it creates new roles and displaces, some legacy roles. And I think the legacy roles that are going to get displaced are those that are pretty rote. right? And that Gen AI can really lean into and automate. And so if you're in a role like that, you might want to think about retooling, reskilling, and leaning into the capabilities of Gen AI so that you remain relevant or become more relevant as we go forward. But I think we're going to see new roles created, like Megan pointed out, content creation. Gen AI is great at content creation. I mean, some of the video that can get created is just amazing.
Don't tell these guys that.
Don't worry, guys. Don't worry.
You're invaluable.
You are absolutely invaluable. But imagine if you get good at how to prompt to create the types of images and video, or the types of slide decks, or the marketing content. There's a lot of, I think, different roles that are going to emerge if you become proficient at how to leverage the AI capabilities. And so, look, we're at a point in the US economy where we're at a historic low in unemployment. If you go back 20 years, the advent of the internet, I'm sure there were all kinds of prognostications about, all kinds of people are going to lose their jobs because of this internet thing. And yet we seem to have expanded the economy, added jobs. So I think I understand the individual concern, but I think the macro concern probably should be less of a worry, and it's more, how do you make sure you stay relevant as the sands shift with AI?
Yeah. And I think about it, like Rob was saying, right? I think of it as job evolution is not so much as loss, right? So for the evolution, I'm think of a couple of examples, right? Think of a salesperson who spends time going through all their emails and PowerPoints and everything to prepare for a client meeting. So that can be done now in minutes. So you're actually spending more time talking to the client and doing something of higher value. So you're eliminating probably that dissatisfaction part of your job,
right,
of having to compile all this stuff and these types of things, and you're spending more time where you and I would be interfacing, and I'd understand your requirements, your need, and how I can help and explain the solutions, right? That's one component. So your job evolves to probably a more satisfying type of activities you're performing. Think of a project manager. Project manager doesn't have to spend hours consolidating notes. They can spend more time understanding the risks, or how to improve the project schedule, or spend more time on the budget. So to me, it's more of an evolution, and you're focusing on those higher level things, which should actually lead to higher job satisfaction, and that gives you an opportunity to improve your skill set off of that too, right?
I'll be honest, I was kind of surprised by this. Again, I'm part of the elder millennial generation. I feel like we're the generation's been burned. So we're like, we are definitely cautiously optimistic, because we're evolved enough in our careers now that we're in a pretty stable spot. So this technology, I think, does lend itself to figure out ways to upskill and make our lives a little bit easier. I'm actually concerned about the younger generations, because a lot of the tasks and skills you're talking about really are more those entry-level things. So I was surprised that and maybe it's to your point earlier, like, they grew up with this stuff. They're already using it, so it doesn't frighten them.
Yeah, they can't use a cassette player or a CD player right now, but they can take the Gen AI and do some crazy stuff with it, right?
But do you think that there's any, I don't know, guidance or words of wisdom you would give to this kind of this entry-level new employee group?
I would kind of say, like, be innovative with the technology, right? That's where the value is going to come from. Don't just follow the basics. See what you can use with this technology in a creative way. And they're really good about that, because you've seen the evolution over that on the different types of apps and some of the social media stuff and what it's capable of. So continue to innovate off of that, right? And use those types of things for that. They have an opportunity to be extremely creative with it, right? Where we grew up and it was more lower level, right?
I would also say adopt it early and adopt it broadly. Use it not just for your personal life, but for school and then eventually work. And I just am asking the kids to stay super close and paying attention to it, and I am as well, because it's going to actually influence, the degree that they get and the career that they go into, because you don't want to gear them up for that they're going to go to college for 4 years and then that job's going to become kind of no longer needed or completely different than what they anticipated. But the closer you stay to the technology, the more you adopt it across your whole life, the better you're going to be able to see those tea leaves. And then just kind of adjust what your plan is.
Yeah.
Great advice.
I'll give you two very personal examples. I got 2 sons and a daughter. My eldest son is a software engineer for a social media company. And so and he's about 3 years into his career. So conversation that I'm having with him now is about how are you leaning into GitHub Copilot, other Copilot code generation technologies that are AI enabled to help you be more productive. And he's loving it. He's taken away a lot of the mundane coding and testing that I used to have to do, so I can really use my brain and engage more.
That's cool.
My younger son, just graduated college last year, is on the CPA track. And so
I'm so sorry for him.
he still seems enthusiastic. That youthful enthusiasm is still there. But the conversation I've been having with him around, should I go into audit? And maybe not.
Maybe not.
Because if you think about, the audit function used to be about, if I distill it down and oversimplify it, it's kind of like you go in and you sample, right? Well, now with these LLMs, you don't have to sample. You can run the gamut and do an end-to-end audit, and you can automate a lot of that. So, sorry to any auditors out there, but you may want to rethink, your career choice going forward, because I think there's roles like that where that rote stuff or stuff where you used to just sampling, and now you can do an end-to-end review is going to be displaced, right?
Yeah.
AI is going to take the place there.
Aside from jobs, the other top concerns, and I think you'll appreciate this, were around security and privacy, particularly with listening devices. So maybe, how do employers and even the manufacturers, how do you message that or be transparent about what the technology is listening, how that data is being used? How do you kind of assuage some of those concerns?
I think transparency is a really important word and a really important disposition to take on this. I think you want to clearly communicate to your employee base what you will and will not measure and monitor. I go back to the point I made earlier, which is if we're going to make the investment in the devices and the AI infrastructure, you want to know that it's getting adopted and leveraged and used to drive productivity and to drive customer engagement and all of those things. But you need to let your employee base know how you're measuring and monitoring it. So I think being clear in terms of a policy statement about what you're doing is really critical to building, either preserving or building trust around the capabilities. So that's one thing I'd point to.
What I loved about how Insight rolled out Insight GPT and just our overall generative AI policy is I think it's a page-and-a-half long. And I think it's written at a 6th grade reading level, And the reason I think that's important is it's super approachable, it's very transparent. A lot of times when we're signing T's and C's for anything that we're doing, it's 25 pages and you just give up. And you're like, I don't know what you're looking at, but fine, I'm just gonna agree to it.
Now I need Copilot to summarize this for me.
Yeah. What exactly is happening? So I imagine that as we update and refine our policies, we'll keep that simplicity in mind so that it's super approachable for people to read and understand, and that I think gives a lot of credibility to our teammates. The coolest thing about that document is we share it with our clients, and the reason we do that is they're really trying to think through their own generative AI policies, and they're kind of stuck. We do have a pretty incredible IT team, CISO organization here internally at Insight, and so they put a lot of time into it, and so why not share it to help our clients get unstuck?
Yeah, great point. So speaking about investments, again, overwhelmingly, people are excited, they're optimistic about where this is headed, and collectively, across all generations, about 3 in 4 employees believe that investing in AI-powered devices will help their employer stay competitive. I think we'd all agree with that. About 1 in 3 employees, about 30%, hope or expect their employer to give them an on-device or on-AI device when they become available. I'm curious, what's your take on this enthusiastic group? Do you think that's realistic and worth doing?
I do. I think it's important, actually. And I'm surprised it's not higher, because you said it's a little over 30%. With where it's going and even what we said to this point of how important Gen AI is and then the machines that support that, I would have expected it to be a little bit higher.
They don't all work at Insight, Matt.
They don't all work at Insight. Fair enough. So yeah, because there's a lot of productivity, there's a lot of benefit to it, and just I want people that want that because they want to stay ahead of the curve, they want to stay cutting edge, right? that's going to help Insight, be efficient, be productive long term, right? It's going to help us help our clients because we've done it, we've been exposed to it. So that's my take.
I kind of wonder if people understand what that AI device means, because we're kind of used, like we have smartphones. We've had this for a long time, but now we're talking about put that in the PC, and I wonder if maybe that connection isn't there yet.
Yeah, because it's not intuitive, I don't think. Not yet, at least. I think the most intuitive manifestation of it is the co-pilots that we see in the Microsoft ecosystem and other vendors' ecosystems, because they've made it simple. They've made it push button. But when we start to get into sort of complex use cases around process optimization, it's less intuitive about how that's going to manifest itself just yet. And so that's where I think we're going to have to be willing to lean in. Our clients are going to have to be willing to lean in to help employees understand that. We're going to have to, help train them on the benefits and how to leverage it. And I think that's a responsibility that employers have to carry.
Yeah, and I really think they need to think about those devices is further enabling the speed and impact of those other systems that the Gen AI, right? Those are that's an enabler for the other things, right? The speed, battery life, the sectioning of resources that allows to function so it's not all going to the cloud, some of it's done locally. All that type of stuff is It's an enabler.
Yeah. How do you sort of plan for this next refresh of devices? Because it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive, I'd imagine, than traditional PCs. So how do you do this sort of responsibly, fiscally, and understand like which users really need this technology?
Yeah, I think the way we've looked at it is we look at across the use cases, kind of like what Megan was saying earlier. We look at where we're at on our refresh cycle. Rob made some great points of COVID, and we were looking at that 3 to 5 years on a refresh standpoint, right? But also, too, if you look at the cost per performance, if you can get the performance of an equal device, but maybe it costs the same as an i7, but you're deploying something different, you can get the productivity out of there. Now, the challenge is, like Rob said with the ROI, it's hard to prove productivity on that sometimes, right? Because you might not see it on the bottom line. You're going to see it in efficiency and productivity of the resources or those higher level tasks that they're performing. So it's difficult. But the way we sectioned it out is early adoption. I'd rather be deploying a next-gen device now rather than later, because then I kind of lock myself into that refresh cycle. So if I deploy a device today, I'm not stuck, but technically I'm stuck for 3 to 5 years for that next refresh. So that means I've locked that technology in from someone for that period of time. I'd rather get more of that in our hands now to take advantage of where that's going to be in 2-3 years.
Yeah,
right?
and it's accelerating so fast, who knows?
Across our OEM landscape, we're seeing the generative AI PC on average is going to be about $120 extra. And so I plan on, via the EBCs with the OEMs and Microsoft to prove that productivity uplift and the ROI is super, super short. The thing that a lot of leaders are talking about, though, is how do you get people in a mindset that they redeploy that productivity for the good of the business and not to go play golf? You know what I mean? Or to go hiking.
We could get one round.
Yeah, right? I mean, maybe a little bit of that, but it's that balance. And so I think it's really leaders being in partnership with their team saying, hey, we did this for you and this is our expectation, and then really brainstorming with them how they could redeploy their time. And a lot of that might just be leaning into continuous education for themselves, because that's one of the things that I love the most about Insight is we're a learning organization. And every day our teammates get stronger and stronger with the content that we provide them. So we'd be giving them more and more capacity to consume that content and learn it. I mean, there's other obvious things, like Matt talked about from a sales perspective. You could spend more time actually meeting with the clients, et cetera. But I think it's a balance across things to just really improve the strength of our team.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece that Megan said. And actually, Rob's really good at this, is you have that leader that then sets that goal a little bit higher, or expects that a little bit higher metric. So when you roll that type of stuff out, you have to expect that return from that. And it's not always easy to, to push that to the teammates. They have to see it, they have to get buy-in, but setting that expectation is important to flow down.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about overcoming burnout. So it seems to be coming at a good time where your job satisfaction, your work-life balance, all of that can really be escalated.
Yeah. The only thing I'd pile onto this is that, looking at it by persona, touched on like the development community, developer community, I think marketing, content creation. There's different functions, different personas where it's going to make sense to think about prioritizing sort of that first wave of the refresh. And that's probably going to vary by industry, vary by client type, vary by service line. But those are, I think, the types of variables that are also going to factor into how you think about your deployment and rollout schedule.
Yeah, what an opportunity for the legal departments. I'd give it to them first.
We talked about ROI before, and it's difficult to measure. There's some intangibles there, but something that a lot of organizations are leaning into very heavily and will increasingly do so is sustainability. Now, when you think about sustainability and AI, those don't usually correlate because AI takes so much computing power. So, Megan, you're really close with the partner community. What does this mean for these devices that are coming out? How could this help?
Yeah, they're all absolutely thinking about it from how they're designing the PCs. It's top of mind as they're working with the chip manufacturers, and they're getting creative on it. There's things like dedicated NPUs to make it run more efficiently, but they know that their device is going to be put right next to their other OEM's device, and that sustainability is so top of mind that it's going to be a huge conversation. You can see it all the time in the client RFIs and RFPs, and so it's going to be tested, it's going to be measured, and it's going to need to be constantly improved on over time. But I know that they're all really deeply working on it.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, too, about the battery life, extending that battery life so much, so that's less power consumption as well.
Yep.
Matt, you mentioned this earlier about how your team is actually testing some of these AI PCs. What do you recommend as sort of that deployment strategy and some of the meaningful adoption to get the most out of these new devices?
Yeah, I mean, from the deployment strategy, right, from the testing strategy, and the way we have a methodology for anything we roll out, right? Get in the hands of some of the core groups that use it, right? We get it into IT, we do your base level of testing, and you have a small deployment and you collect that feedback. The great thing is our partners are really good about working with us, so we get immediate feedback on those types of things. We have on-site sessions where we run through this type of stuff, and then you just expand it, to Rob's point, to the persona. So if you've got this, maybe that goes out to the developers, or hey, there's a particular Gen I that goes out to the PM. So you can start to define where that stuff comes from, or where it's going to be the most beneficial, and then you slowly roll it out to those pieces. Because as you roll out, with like anything you roll out, you're going to run into challenge. And the idea is to catch it with a smaller group and then fix it before it gets out, to a larger majority.
Before it goes to Joyce.
Rollout. Before it goes to our CEO, exactly, yes.
When we talk about the rollout, you mentioned sort of getting employees ready, maybe get your power users, your early adopters to embrace it. When we asked this in the survey, a lot of the respondents indicated that they really want clarity from their employers about how to use the devices. What are the guidelines and guardrails that are going to be in place, and kind of, it sounds like, have their hand held through the process. What would you say is a good sort of policy or best practice for that employee coaching side? How much is on the employer to do that coaching, and how much of it is on the employee?
I think you need to be prepared to do it at scale, right? I think there's an ownership that employers have to take. So we rolled out a whole Gen AI certification training program, and we encouraged consumption of that training, and we may have measured how much that training was getting consumed. And I think that's important. I think we've got to be willing to help educate the employee base and help enable them to use these devices and to use Gen AI more broadly. So I think the employers need to bear some of that responsibility to deliver the training to the end user community. And then back to the point I made earlier, which is, but then the responsibility is on the end user community to enable it, to use it and adopt it and deploy it, and you also need to be willing to measure and monitor that.
Yeah.
I would totally agree with Rob. To me, it's a balance. You have to provide the material, but it's then on an individual to kind of take that to the next level. So that kind of goes with my earlier statements of, I don't want to restrict or force it so much. I want someone to be innovative off of it, because you want that person that comes to you and wants it and wants to take it to that next step off of everything. So remove those barriers and give them the opportunity so it's there, and then encourage it from there.
Yeah, Insight's great about that. Remember when generative AI came out and it was like, here's a new playground, just go and figure out what you can do with it, and it was a good time.
Yeah.
We're currently reviewing the submittals for our generative AI contest that we did within my team. And the cool thing about Insight is it's not just my team that did contests for the best generative AI use cases to improve employee experience or client experience or productivity, but other departments did this as well, and super leaned into it. Our grand prize is $10,000, equivalent to a 1-year Tesla lease. So we had a lot of submissions. It's been a hard work to narrow down to the finalists that we've been reviewing today and tomorrow, but my gosh, the creativity that people have come forward with it, the amount of thought leadership that they put into it has just been outstanding, and they seem like super, super energized about it and all leaned in. So I think, you know, as employers, we have the opportunities to think about how do we make this fun too? And the cool thing about it was almost everybody presented not as an individual but as a team. So it kind of was like a collaborative effort across the board for what we were seeing.
Yeah, we took a similar approach within our department, and you know, gamifying it, made a contest. We weren't quite as generous with the awards.
Well, we know who the better leader is.
But for sure. But it drove engagement, and the creativity that we saw in the use cases that they wanted to solve for, and the collaboration and the teamwork that came out of it was great. And it was, you know, so well received. We're about to launch another one here soon. So yeah, I think making it that makes it less threatening as well when you kind of gamify it a little bit.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Megan used to be in finance, so she knows different strings to pull with budget stuff. So.
Might be the partners, I don't know.
Fair enough. Before we close this out, Megan, what do you think is the biggest benefit for clients of choosing a partner like Insight to help them through this device lifecycle journey?
I think it's two things. I think one is that Insight's leaned into generative AI as one of the fastest adopters globally. So we've been learning it internally really well. And we've taken this very personally. We plan to have the biggest and broadest global campaign relative to generative AI PCs. We think we're significantly ahead of our competition in understanding the productivity gains by persona, and that we'll be able to guide them to the right PC for the right persona to get the maximum increase in teammate satisfaction and productivity, and the right PC for the next 3 to 4 years for them.
Anything else?
I just amplify that. I mean, we're drinking our own champagne here.
Yeah.
We're early adopters. We benefit from having great partnerships across the OEM landscape, and so they've made, you know, devices available to us that we're piloting internally so that we can advise our clients on how best to think about their deployment cycles as well.
Yep.
Well, thank you all very much for your time and insights today. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and kind of find out what's going on.
Did we get to everything you wanted to?
I think so, yeah. Thank you for joining us. If you'd like any more information about how Insight can help you with your device lifecycle, or just more information about AI PCs, just visit insight.com. We'll see you next time.